participate on chamber committees.
And you can have it all with your membership in the Greater Bakersfield Chamber of Commerce.
This is Strictly Business, presented by the Greater Bakersfield Chamber of Commerce. Sponsored in part by the law offices of Young Wooldridge, San Joaquin Community Hospital.
And welcome back to Strictly Business. I'm Nathan Ollie, Manager of Government Affairs at the Greater Bakersfield Chamber of Commerce. And we all know that managing a company's reputation and knowing what steps to take to protect it can be a very daunting task. But here to provide some insight into reputation management is Larry Pickett, local public relations expert. Larry, thanks a lot for being here.
A pleasure, Nathan. Thank you.
So you run your own public relations shop, Larry Pickett Public Relations. So you're an expert in this. What is reputation management? What are we talking about when we say reputation management?
To define reputation management, a lot has to do with having a clear understanding of what you want to manage. Mm-hmm. And in terms of a business, for example, so much of that, the reputation and the perception of your reputation, hopefully it's a good one, rests on the quality of your service and the quality of your product that you have out there. And in that process, the main targets, all kinds of people that will have an interest in your reputation and your performance. The top two on the list that I look at are, of course, your customers, how they perceive you, mm-hmm. and of course how your employees perceive you, that they're proud of the reputation and what they're doing with your company.
Right. So how do you apply this directly to a business like you mentioned your reputation with your consumers? Social media, I think we're all seeing, is becoming even more and more every day, just a larger part of the business world and of the customer experience. So what about things like negative customer feedback through social media? What do we need to be looking for there?
Well, the challenge on that, of course, is to keep track, for a lot of companies, keeping track of what's being said about you mm-hmm. on social media. And having large companies may have staff that actually focus on the social media just to keep tabs on that. But the key issue is that there's some negative information out there that you don't believe is valid. Okay. That you respond very, very quickly and to correct those misperceptions.
But you can respond both positively and, I guess in some instances, if a company responds, can they make a bad situation worse?
Well, they certainly can if they don't have a clear understanding of exactly what that information is and what the impact of that information could have on their operations. So it's a key challenge for a company to be on top of the actual nature of that message so that they are responding positively rather than making a mistake.
Okay. And in a small organization, would it be appropriate for one or two key people in the organization to sort of monitor the social media, or would it be something that anybody who's a staff member, how would you recommend setting up some kind of internal policy on how to manage those types of issues?
Well, it would depend on, again, the size of the company and the availability of staff to do this. I know in some companies that if they don't have let's say a public relations function, sometimes their customer relations and marketing people or their HR people could assume that responsibility in addition to what they're doing. Mm-hmm. But in most cases, with companies around Bakersfield and Kern County, hopefully that they won't be faced with a lot of those negative challenges.
Right.
Versus some industries. I've been involved with the oil industry for a long, long time, and that industry has a lot of challenges in terms of perceptions mm-hmm. about how they're operating and the impacts on the community. Not so much any negatives, not so much in Kern County, because we understand the importance
right.
of oil, but certainly when you look at publicity at various other parts of the state and some of the major newspapers and the whole issue of fracking and that type of thing, oil is faced with a challenge to explain what it's doing effectively and to keep that type of stance.
And sort of clear up a lot of the misconceptions that you might see in popular media today, sure. Now, what about individuals who may take sort of a sideways path on the road to positive reputation management, say a trusted news anchor. I don't know, maybe Brian Williams or somebody like that. Let's say, what would you do in a situation like that when you have a news anchor who is theoretically a very trusted and respected name? Where do you go in a situation like that?
Well, you go. One of the first things you do is what NBC did do was to suspend Williams for several months. Because in that particular case, you're not just talking about Brian Williams, but you're talking about the trust, the word that you use, trust as it relates to the news organization. And with their desire to get people to tune in to that particular newscast, they have to have representatives of their news organization that people will feel are providing them with the facts that they need. Whether or not Williams individually can bounce back, it remains to be seen. He's suspended for 6 months, but I might just ask you answer part of that question by asking you, when he comes back on the air, if he does, how would you react to watching his newscast?
Well, that's you. I think would have to take. And having a journalism background, I certainly think I would take everything he says with a grain of salt, which is a far cry from the Ed Murrow, Walter Cronkite days for sure of the authoritative man behind the desk reading the news. So it would definitely be a challenge.
And I think that's what he would face.
Right.
You're right about Cronkite. He was characterized as the most trusted man in America at that particular time, and there was never really any question in his case that he ever exaggerated stories or his role within stories, as Williams is accused of doing.
So how does Brian Williams rebuild, and where would he start?
It depends on NBC whether or not they make a decision at some point to put him back on the air. And he is, despite exaggerating or allegedly exaggerating some of these experiences, he has established, and at one point was trusted by his audiences. So I don't think he can apologize again. He's already apologized for that, but you can only apologize so many times, and people not lose their patience with that. They may put him in doing special news programs or some of the other documentaries and other things and at that point, if NBC feels that he would be a valuable asset to their organization, then he may be able, over time, we tend to be a rather forgiving country in a lot of respects. So people who've been, say, in politics, who went to jail and they got out, and their reputation, whether the reputations ever did fully recover, which is unlikely, but they were able to continue on. So Williams may continue on, but maybe not in that anchor role.
So from a broader perspective, let's say you have an employee that's faced with some type of scandal or other negative PR event. How does a company start to rebuild that trust factor? I mean, like you said, you can only apologize so many times. Where do you go?
Well, if you're talking about an employee in the organization, from a personnel standpoint, you have to deal with that individually.
Right.
What did that employee do that could have a negative impact on your organization? And at least initially, perhaps do like they did with NBC did with Brian Williams, get him out of the limelight until you sorted out the issues, and being fair to that employee. If he or she is accused of doing something that negatively impacts you, then you have to go through a process to correct the issue for your organization, but also respect the rights of that individual until the facts are known.
And again, be as transparent as possible with the process, and sort of show that you as an organization are, I don't want to say remorseful, because the organization itself may not have done anything wrong, but the organization is aware of the severity of offenses like that? Well,
transparency is the key word anymore in politics, in the media, in all kinds of situations, so that you're not giving the impression that you have something to hide. If you are actually, in this case, if you're dealing with an employee situation that needs to be dealt with, certainly indicate that you, as an organization, were very concerned about that situation and the impacts and the behavior of this individual, that you're taking you're concerned about it, and you're taking whatever action is necessary to correct the problem. Because again, like with the news organization, your value is the trust of the people that want to tune in to get the news.
Right. And as you said, Americans tend to be a forgiving people for the most part. So if you show as a business a sense of transparency, understanding of the process and the severity of the issue, the hope then is that the customers will begin to rebuild the trust.
Well, I think a good example of that is Johnson & Johnson with the Tylenol situation several years ago. Johnson & Johnson had a very solid, positive reputation. And if you're in a crisis situation like that, if your reputation is a positive one, then it helps you get through a situation like that more easily. If people don't like your organization and you have a crisis, the opposite could happen. And so they not only got through that, but they saved Tylenol as a product, which a lot of people thought was done. After they had to recall all those, that you might not see it anymore. But they took the action, the transparent action, recall and all of that, to make sure that they could keep that product going. And they maintained trust with the public, and they were able to rebuild it over time with some people that were out there.
Okay. Well, Larry Pickett, owner of Larry Pickett Public Relations, we appreciate you coming in and talking about reputations and how we can protect those as best as we possibly can. So thanks very much for coming in.
Okay, Nathan, thank you.
We'll take a break and be right back after this with more Strictly Business.